Hey parents, welcome to another edition of the Student Ministry Parent Library. I'm Ronald, I'm the middle school pastor at 410 campus, and I wanted to let you know about the most helpful analogy I've ever heard when it comes to cell phones. Now I know and understand that your kid has probably asked you for a cell phone at least 20 times if they're in the 6th grade. My oldest daughter is a 4th grader this year. Some of her friends already have cell phones, and not just cell phones, like nicer than my iPhones. So I get it. Your student has probably asked you for a cell phone at least once, and more than likely, you either have very strong feelings about it and you do not want your student to have a phone whatsoever, or maybe you've taken the attrition approach, as in your student has finally worn you down, you don't care anymore, here's the phone, please stop asking. No matter where you fall on that spectrum, the most helpful analogy I've ever heard on handing students cell phones is driving. So walk with me here. When it comes to cell phones, it's really great if you think of them like giving your kid the car keys. Most of you wouldn't probably hand your 11-year-old car keys. Now, I've asked during middle school ministry, and some of these 13 and 14-year-olds have told me they've driven. That kind of makes me nervous. But I know that you didn't just hand that 13 or 14-year-old the keys and say, good luck. In fact, that kid of yours spent most of their childhood watching you drive. They looked at you driving. They understood that you're supposed to turn here or maybe use a signal there. I hope you do use a turn signal. That's important. They've asked about what the signs mean. They asked why you have to stop at the red light. They've asked a whole bunch of questions. And if they're anything like my kids, they probably know a lot just because of all the questions they've had to ask you when it comes to driving. Well, the time comes when eventually your kid gets old enough to not sit in the back seat and watch you drive, but to sit in the front seat and watch you drive. Now that's kind of a scary thing, because when they're in the front, they can see all of your good and maybe your bad habits too when it comes to driving. They know if you're checking your phone. They know if you're paying attention to everything. They know if you're using their turn signal, because they're right there next to you while you're driving. And then soon, they're going to turn 15. Or maybe you even start teaching them a little earlier than that, and you swap places. But when you swap places, you don't just put them out on I-35 and wish for the best, right? You take them to an old road that not a lot of people drive on, and you let them take the car up to a certain speed limit. And then you drive around a little bit, and you get them used to what it feels like to drive and to turn and to stop and to use signals and look in the mirrors. Well, then eventually you allow them a little bit more freedom in their driving. You're still in the passenger seat, but maybe now they can drive on a highway. And then eventually they can drive on the interstate. I know when I was learning to drive, my mom told me, Ronald, I feel safe with you driving. It's all these other crazy people out here that I'm worried about. Now that I'm a driver, I understand she was talking about me. Eventually the time is going to come when you hand your kid, the car keys, and you don't get in the driver's seat. You watch them drive away. Even still, you probably have some guidelines for them, right? Be back by 8 p.m. Only have one other friend in the car. Make sure that you can actually hear the noises outside and that you're not blasting the neighborhood with your music, right? Eventually, those stipulations become less and less until your kid has total freedom in the car. It's a really helpful analogy when it comes to thinking about cell phones. Now, you could also probably take this with social media as well, but that's another library episode for another time. But go with me here. Your student has watched you use a phone. They know how to work a phone. They probably already know how to take pictures and text. Even if they don't own a phone, they've probably done it for you. You've probably asked them to do this for you before. handed them a phone while you're driving and say, hey, can you text dad and let him know we're on the way? Or, hey, call grandma, it's her birthday, right? You have done things like this with them. So probably by this stage, at the very minimum, your student's in the front seat with you of the car. They're not driving, but they're in the front. Now, when it comes time for y'all to switch places, I don't know if you took them out in the nicest car your family has. You probably took them out in whichever car you thought either had the most insurance or could handle the most beatings. I learned how to drive on a 1995 Astrovan, not because it was the nicest car we had, but because it was a tank, and my dad knew that I couldn't mess it up too much. We don't hand our 16-year-olds keys to the Lamborghini, right? We give them keys to the beater. Now, what that might mean is when it's time for your kid to have a cell phone, they don't get a smartphone. Because think about what that smartphone can do. It can take pictures, it can take video, it can download apps, it can access the internet. That might be like handing your kid the keys to the Lamborghini. You may need to hand them either a dumb phone, a phone that doesn't have all those features, or a smartphone that's locked up, that you've gone in and you've checked off all the features and you've said that it can't take pictures or it can't take video or it can't access the internet or what have you. At any rate, the first phone you hand to a student, that probably doesn't need to be a great phone. My first phone was my dad's secretary's old phone. It was that Nokia brick. And while you probably can't get a Nokia brick anymore, you can probably find a phone that only makes phone calls and only texts. Maybe that's a good first step for your son or daughter. And then as they progress, and as you trust them more and more with their phone, and as they earn your trust, maybe move them up to a phone that can take video and pictures. And then maybe unlock the phone a little bit more to where the phone does have social media. But again, looking at that driver analogy, maybe they have social media, but only you've got the password. Thinking about how to progressively move your student up towards more and more freedom instead of just handing them the keys to the Lamborghini right away. I understand, though, that some of you are thinking, my kid already has an iPhone. I've already given them the keys to the nicest car we've got. Well, the good news is you're the parent, you're the mom, you're the dad. You have the authority to say, hey, we started out like this, and maybe now we need to back this thing up. It might not mean taking the phone away, but it could mean you guys setting some ground rules and saying, hey, I gave you a phone, but now that I'm thinking about it, we need to have some limitations. Maybe that phone doesn't need to charge in your bedroom at night. And maybe that phone needs to belong to me when you're at school. Whatever the stipulations that you guys come up with, have your student agree to them. Have them sign a piece of paper or write down and acknowledge that if these rules are broken, the phone is yours again. Because let's be honest, your student probably didn't buy that phone. Either you gave it to them because it was your old one, or you purchased it with your own money. That's your phone. It's being borrowed by your student. No matter what that looks like for you, think about the analogy of teaching your student how to drive and handing them a cell phone. I think they'll be far better prepared for when they're ready to have the completely unlocked, unfiltered, ready to go iPhone if we stair-step our students up bits at a time instead of handing them keys to the Lamborghini right away. Hope that was some helpful tips for you guys. Hope that helped you guys think about how you might be able to give your kids this gifts of communication so that you can know when they're done with soccer practice, when they need to be picked up from a friend's house, or so that they can just call grandma on their own and wish her a happy birthday from their cell phone. I'm Ronald Long. I'm the middle school pastor at 410 campus. Thanks so much for hanging out, parents. We'll see you on another episode of the Parent Library.